Thank you. Please be seated. Turn with me to the book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 9. We have been in this series, well, it feels like forever. But it's been good, and I don't know how much longer. You might get a break here in the next couple of weeks. But we are still continuing with Jacob. And let me just say this, because I'm in the mood for picking on people this morning. I'm outside minding my own business, and here comes Bill, starting a conversation with me, and he got me fired up with our conversation, and I was doing something else I normally don't do on Sunday, is I had a big cup of coffee in my hand. So if I seem extra excited or jittery this morning, it's a combination of coffee and Bill, and you can blame whoever you want. And for once, Bob is not to blame. We love you, Bob.
I owe you one.
I know you do. That's okay. So yeah, we're still following Jacob, and if you've been here over the last few weeks, and if you haven't, that's okay, because you are going to quickly realize this is one of the most messed up, dysfunctional families, where the things that happen to them and they put upon others just makes your head hurt. Like, how is this even possible? Here's the good news. If God can use a family like that, He can use your family too. Because no matter how messed up, no matter what kind of baggage, no matter how dysfunctional it is, it will not come close to how messed up and dysfunctional this family is. Jacob and his older brother Esau is just kind of a crash course. Esau was the outdoorsy, kind of a man's man. Jacob, sticking a little bit closer to home, has been overmothered, been a little bit coddled too. Jacob didn't have to make money. He came from a wealthy family. Everything was handed to him. He had a lawnmower mom who just went down and mowed all difficulties in front of him so that he didn't have to make any decisions on his own. Dad favored the older brother. Mom favored him. As a result, he has become very self-centered, selfish, manipulative. He is great at deceiving other people. He has tricked his brother out of his birthright, and his older brother Esau is so angry with him, he has resolved to kill him, Jacob. Jacob's mom says, "Run for your life. This is not going to end well." And so what happens is you've got Jacob, who is a middle-aged dude who's 40 years old, and he has wasted decades of his life. And now all of a sudden he's on his own, and he's trying to figure out life and how to do things because his mom and dad never really showed him how. So at the end of this, you might look at it from the perspective of, oh, well, Jacob was kind of stupid. Look what ended up happening to him. The other side of the coin has been, well, look at how his parents raised him. And it will be challenging on both sides. So with that, let's pick up in chapter 29, verse number 1. Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east, verse 2. And he looked, and behold, a well in the field. And lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it, for out of that well they watered the flocks. And a great stone was upon the well's mouth. So picture this as a deep well in the ground, but it was protected, or it was covered by a giant rock, a giant boulder. And this would do a few things. One is to help not contaminate the water, and it would also help protect who it belonged to. Verse 3. And thither there were all the flocks gathered, and they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, gave water to the sheep, and put the stone back upon the well's mouth in its place. Okay, so let's kind of think about this in 21st century terms. In this culture, a well was considered what we would call the third place. Here's what I mean by it. It's a place where you would hang out. It's a place where you would make connections. You would go to socialize. You might even go there for business reasons. Where you live in the 21st century, where you live would be considered your first place. Where you work would be considered your second place. and where you socialize would be considered your third place. So it could be a coffee shop or your community pool, church. It could even be one of the attractions up on I-4 or a friend's house, just a gathering place where you would go to socialize, maybe talk a little business. Historically, a well is where men and women might meet. And a lot of times, those first meetings would eventually lead to them getting married. This happened with Moses and Zipporah. It happened with Jacob's own parents, Isaac and Rebekah. So now you've got Jacob, who's been coddled his whole life. He is running from his own family. He's got no money. He's never done life before. He doesn't know how to balance a checkbook. He doesn't know how to get to Publix. He doesn't even know how to pump his own gas with his own donkey, right? It's like everything has just been done for him all the time. He has never learned responsibility. There are some times, I don't know if I should say this. There are some times mom and dad need to be with their kids. Sometimes life-changing things happen. This past Thursday was one of those days, and I can't tell you all of it, but we had an appointment, a medical appointment with one of the kids, and it was one of those appointments where mom and dad both need to be there. And I know everything's going to be okay. And trust me when I say everything is okay, but sometimes there's just a lot of unknowns. And you don't know how it's going to work. You don't know how it's all going to work out. And there are times where it's not good enough for just mom to be there. And it's not good enough for just dad to be there. You need both mom and dad. But here's what's going to happen, church. If mom and dad aren't both present when your kids are young to show them what needs to be done, there is going to come a day, whether we like it or not, where Rachel and I are not going to be around. And the kids are going to have to do life on their own. So the benefit is not just to be there for them now, it's how to set them up for the future. Hey, there are difficult decisions that are going to need to be made. Do we make these decisions now? Do we put them off? Do we take this course of action? Do we take that course of action? What are the long-term effects? Not just the short-term. What are the long-term effects that's going to happen going into adulthood? And it doesn't always come with easy answers. And Jacob has been poorly prepared. It's like a little bit of a lighter analogy. It's like cooking a steak. You don't want it undercooked. You don't want to eat it raw. But at the same time, you don't want to overcook it either, and you've got a piece of leather in front of you. It's like you got to find that perfect temperature. You got to find that perfect balance. And sometimes as parents, we can be guilty of either underparenting, and sometimes we can be guilty of overparenting. To be completely stereotypical, and I know this isn't always the way it is, and there are exceptions, but just painting a broad stroke, I would dare to say non-Christian fathers tend to underparent. They'll figure it out. They'll be okay. Just leave me alone. I want to watch TV. I want to hang out with the guys, whatever. And on the other side of it, well-intentioned Christian mothers sometimes overparent. And we as believers have got to find that balance of we're going to coach them, we are going to love them, we are going to help them, but at some point we got to begin pivoting where they're going to make their own wise and godly decisions.
That's right.
Christian parents, sometimes we love and we care for our children so much that we overparent. And it's like, okay, well, next year when you turn 28, we'll let you take the car out. And it's like, okay, come on. And if you think I'm not kidding, I have stories, and I'm not going to tell you the stories because in law they change the names to protect the innocent, and in ministry we change names to protect the guilty. Right? It's true. And let's face it, we know our world is a dark place. We know the world's a dark place. And we love our kids. And there are certain things we don't want to expose our kids to. But at some point, they're going to walk right into it. That's right. And so how they handle it is going to be determined by how we parent. They can walk into it with two options. Number one, with their eyes open, a look of innocence, knowing how to be pure in a world that's impure. Or two, with their eyes closed, ignorant, which leads to being scammed, heartbroken, could lead into a bad relationship or sometimes even addiction. That's right. So with Jacob, he has been overparented. He's trying to figure out life outside of his house and his family. He's ignorant. He's never worked a job. He's likely never pursued a woman. He's never had a relationship. He's never had to pay the electric bill. He doesn't know how to log into online banking and use bill pay. It's just everything's been handed to him. So as Jacob approaches, he is in the direction of his hometown. And along the way, he stops in this area, and there is a well. And he goes up to this well, and here's what happens. Verse 4. Jacob said unto the people who are gathered at this well, my brethren, friends, whence be? They said, where do you come from? And they said, well, we're from Haran. Haran is our hometown. And Jacob's going, wait a minute, I've got roots there myself. Verse 5. Keep in mind these were small communities. Jacob says to them, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, yeah, we know who Laban is. Laban is Jacob's uncle. And if you recall, when Jacob's dad Isaac got a wife, Rebekah was living at home. Rebekah's brother is Laban. We covered this about a month ago, and Laban he just got a brief mention. And I said a month ago when we said his name that he was going to show up later as being a manipulator. Well, this is the week. And if you thought your family was dysfunctional, you ain't seen nothing yet. So Jacob knows, wait a minute, I got family there. My mom's brother lives there. And so he asks them, do you know who Laban is? And they're like, yeah, we know Laban. Verse 6. Jacob says to them, is he doing well? Is he healthy? Everything going okay? And they said, well, he's doing well. And behold, look, his daughter, Rachel, is coming with the sheep. And Jacob looks over, and all of a sudden, this is where time stands still. The focus is on Rachel, and Jacob turns, and here comes a hard-working, beautiful woman, and all of a sudden, in the pupils of Jacob's eyes, fireworks go off. Cue the romance music. Dun, 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 dun. And he is just like enamored, like, wait a minute, that's her? Verse 7. And he said, lo, isn't yet high day, neither is it time that the cattle should be gathered together. Water ye the sheep, and go and feed them. Verse 8. And they said, we cannot until all the flocks be gathered together, until they roll the stone from the well's mouth, then we will water the sheep. Verse 9. And while he yet spake with them, so he's having this conversation, here comes Rachel with her father's sheep, for she was the one who kept them. So this is a family business. They've got a farm. They herd cattle. This is her helping carry the load and carry the burden of the family business. She works along hard with the rest of them. There is nothing more beautiful, in my opinion, than a very beautiful but hard-working lady. And that's Rachel. This is her, and Jacob's just like starry-eyed, glossed over, his heart starts racing, and there's drool coming down the side of his face, and it's like, hey, wake up, get yourself together over here. Verse number 10. It came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near. And again, he's never been around. He's a middle-aged guy who's never been outside his own family's bubble. And all of a sudden, it's like, hey, life is starting to hit me. Who is that? And what ends up happening here is Jacob. Jacob is about to, he's going to show off. It's kind of like what we're going to see here. It's like what I feel like I do with my Rachel after I have picked up my dumbbells at home and I've done all of 3 reps. Right? 1, 2, 3. Well, that's good for another year. Right? I mean, come on. Like, come on, Rach. Are you not impressed with, the strength that I've got going on here? Verse 11. This is a little. Sorry, I forgot the second part here. Go back. Let me read verse 10. It came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near, the second part of it, and he, Jacob, rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. So ordinarily, what would happen is it would take 3 or 4 guys to move this stone. It would take 3 or 4 guys to be able to, this thing was heavy. Jacob's going to do it by himself. Right? He's showing off. Look at how strong I am. Verse 11, Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and he wept. Now, don't be going all woke on me over here, okay? Kissing would be their cultural way of meeting. We would shake somebody's hand. You might even give them a hug if you happen to have mutual friends or you've known of them. But giving a kiss on it's simply a greeting. That's really all it was. So here's Jacob. And he's still socially awkward. Right? He's never spent a lot of time around the ladies. So he kind of just melts and becomes a mess, right? So Jacob kisses Rachel and he lifts up his voice and he cries, he weeps. She's probably like, who are you? Like, what are you doing? Verse 12, Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father, Laban. Verse 13, it came to pass when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him, kissed him, brought him to his house, and he told Laban all of these things. Verse 14, Laban said to him, surely thou art my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him the spare of about a month. So Jacob has kind of found his space. He's made a connection with a family member, an extended family member, if you will. And he kind of settles in and honestly might even get into a little bit of a rut. It's like, hey, you need to be figuring life out on your own, but he sort of attaches himself to his uncle. And it's like, I just work for you. Is that okay? Can I stay with you for a while? And Laban's like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I want you to stay here. We're relatives. Why don't you stick around for at least a month? And Jacob, who had a moment with God last week, who now realizes that who God is and that he has a plan for his life is trying to figure out what's life supposed to look like inside a relationship with God, and what am I supposed to do with my life? This is new to him. And he's trying to figure out how to live independently after being babied his entire life. And one moment, he's moving boulders, and the next moment, he's crying on a woman he just met. Now maybe, and I'm just speculating, some of you single ladies in here are like, oh, well, he's my man. I like a guy who's strong and sensitive. Hey, yeah, I see those reactions. Some of you are like blushing over there, and that's okay, right? I mean, it is what it is, okay? Now, here comes the sneaky and manipulative Uncle Laban. Verse 15. Laban says to Jacob, because you're my brother, because we're related, because we got a bond going on here. Should you serve me for nothing? A month goes by. Jacob hasn't been paid. He's been helping Laban with the family business. He's been helping him of the family farm and to herd the sheep and tend to the cattle. And if you've ever worked on a farm, that's some hard work, right? Those cows don't milk themselves. You got to be up at 5 o'clock, and you're going to be up sometimes all night making sure that sheep don't go wandering. It's a never-ending job. He's been at it a month, and his uncle says, look, you've been here for a month. You've not gotten paid anything. How much do you think your work is worth? How much do you want to get paid here? What do you want for payment? Here's where things start going a little bit weird. Verse 16, Laban had 2 daughters. See where this is going? The name of the older daughter was Leah. The name of the younger daughter was Rachel. Now Jacob's met both of them. He's been working. He knows who the family. He's been there for a month. Verse 17, Leah was tender-eyed, and we're not entirely sure what this means. Some would say she just had soft eyes. Some would say that she had some sort of disability with her eye, perhaps even like lazy eye, or she just had problems with her sight. There was something that wasn't quite right. But on the other hand, Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. So in this case, the younger daughter is prettier than the older daughter. And again, in this culture, having very sharp, beautiful eyes that were dark and would contrast would be like the gold standard for beauty. And so in Jacob's eyes, he's had eyes for Rachel since he saw her coming to the well with her sheep. I mean, it's been like he's been melting over her from the beginning. Verse 18. Jacob loved Rachel. Now he's been spending more time with her. They've been working together. They've been eating together. They live on the same land. They do work together, and they have likely been talking. And when you spend that much time with somebody, things move fast. Jacob loved Rachel and said to Laban, I will serve you for 7 years. For Rachel, your younger daughter. So that's what I want my payment to be. I'll give you 7 years, and I want to have your permission to have your younger daughter, Rachel. And so Laban thinks to himself, verse 19, well, it's better that I would rather have her marry you than to marry somebody else I don't know as well. So let's go ahead and make this a plan. You stick around for 7 years, we'll make this happen. And here comes one of the most beautiful verses in all of Scripture. Verse 20. Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. And they seemed unto him but a few days for the love that he had for her. And it's like, if you're reading this in your own quiet time, like I'm going through this and like I'm blubbering all over the place. Oh, this is so sweet. Give me another box of tissues. This is just this beautiful meltdown moment that's like, oh my word, he is just so head over heels. Or it's like this love at first sight, but sometimes that gets a little bit weird. And now they spent time together, and oh my word, 7 years. Now I get back to reality here for a second. Here comes the complication. Laban is not a good person. He is a very evil person. And based on the last few weeks, Jacob is very naive. Evil people hunt down and take advantage of naive people. They always have. Nothing has changed. Evil people will hunt down and take advantage of naive people. So part of this, you have to understand biblical customs and cultures in ancient days. There was something that was called a dowry, or sometimes we would refer to it as a bride's price. Here's how it worked. Rachel's part of the family business. If you wanted to marry a woman, the cultural practice would be is to pay a monetary price. It wasn't that you were paying for the girl as a commodity. I'd give you $100 for it. No. That was not the idea behind it. What you were doing is you were helping to offset the expense of taking her away from the family business, the family, and the work that she would bring to the table as part of the family business. So, where she's going to be pulled away, they're going to have to perhaps hire somebody on, or everybody else is going to have to pick up the slack because Rachel's no longer coming to the well with her flock of sheep. Somebody else is going to have to do that. So to help offset that, you would pay a dowry. You would pay a bride's price. It was, hey, I'm going to marry one of your daughters to help offset and carry on the family business. I'm going to pay you for that absence, that hole that she's going to leave in your family. Now here's the problem. Jacob doesn't have any money. He's on the run from his own brother. He took off in a hurry. Any little money he would have had, he's likely squandered at this point. So not out of the ordinary, arranging to pay the dowry or pay the bride's price by working it off would have been perfectly acceptable. In fact, this culture still exists in places in the Far East like India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and other places. In today's Western world, it would be a little bit more customary to ask the father for permission to marry your daughter. Now, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but Rachel and I are coming up on 20 years of marriage, and 20 years later, I am still scared to death to talk to my father-in-law. He is just one of those intimidating people, man of few words, death look on his face, and you can't read him. You know what I'm saying? So imagine me, you rewind 20 years. And I get out my phone. Pretty sure it was a flip phone. We didn't live close by. We lived further apart. Mr. Clark? This is Tim. I've got a question for you. It was the weirdest, most awkward conversation you would have ever witnessed in your entire life. Okay? Totally caught him off guard. And after I kind of finally spit it out, he goes, "Oh." And it got real quiet. And he agreed to allow me to marry, ironically, his daughter, Rachel. But he set a condition on it. Now, at the time, I was 19 or 20. I was in the middle of college. Rachel, I married an older woman. She was a little bit ahead of me. And it's a good thing she's in the kids' room today. I'll just tell you that. I'm going to hide the recording after church and try to distract her. So none of you, this is our little secret with this whole thing, right? He put out a condition that I stupidly verbally agreed to on the phone that I did not live up to. To the point where there was some drama, whether he was going to be there to walk her down the aisle. Do you understand why it's been 20 years and I'm still scared of the guy, right? Okay, now I wasn't going to tell you what it is, but here's what's going to happen. After church, we're going to tear everything down and put it away, and Carl's going to come up to me and he's going to go, Pastor Tim, great message. By the way, can I ask, what was it that your father-in-law wanted to... And since I'm going to tell it to him, I just tell it to you all now, okay? I know how to predict the future. All right, so here's what it was. He wanted us to wait till after we graduated from college to get married. We didn't, okay? That summer is when we got married. By the way, I am in favor of short engagements. Personal opinion, personal belief, I think they're just better. If you are that committed to each other and you're willing to make a lifelong commitment, there's no point in hanging on and hanging on. I have a great aunt. She was engaged to her fiance for 13 years. Okay? Never quite understood that. That's the other side of the family, and there aren't enough hours in the day for me to get started on the dysfunction on the other side of the family. Okay? So he wanted to wait. He wanted us to wait till we graduated from college to get married. I'm like, okay, sure, whatever you say, as long as I can. Click, get off, right? We ended up getting married after my junior year. I was 20. I was 20 when I asked her to marry me. A few months later, I had turned 21 when we actually had the ceremony. Okay? So that's the story on our end. Jacob offers Laban to work for the family business for 7 years in exchange to let Rachel go. If my father-in-law would have said, he's got land, he's got like 40, 50 acres, if he would have told me, well, I want you to come help me work the land up here for the next 7 years, we'd have been eloping to Vegas, okay? That's just the way it would have happened. And yet, here's Jacob, who has such deep love and desire for her that not only does he agree for 7 years, but they only feel like a few days. Now, when you convert the standard rate of how long a young man would have worked for the family business to pay off the dowry, to pay off the bride's price, Jacob's offer to Laban to work for 7 years is a very generous offer. A couple other things this would do. This would prove his ability to be a husband, that he can work hard, that he can provide for his family. So old-fashioned, right? Like, get a job and then get married. Now, what happens is this, and I got to catch you up to speed. Between verse 20 that we just read and verse 21, those 7 years have transpired. Jacob has completed his work for Laban. We don't know everything that takes place, but we've got an indication based on how the story ends. Verse 21, Jacob said to Laban, I'm ready to have Rachel for my wife. For my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. So Jacob, you better watch your language there. Verse number 22, Laban gathered together all the men of the place, and he made a feast. So now everything is coming together. They're going to have the wedding. Jacob has fulfilled his obligation. He's ready to get married. Laban prepares a banquet for everybody. Everybody's going to be there. We're going to make a big to-do out of this. Remember how I mentioned that Laban was not a good person? And he was very manipulative? Yeah, things aren't going to go according to plan. Verse 23. It came to pass in the evening, so perhaps they've had the ceremony. It's getting dark. Can't see very well. And Jacob's like, finally, all the ceremony stuff is over with, and I get to spend my first night with my bride, Rachel. It came to pass in the evening that he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to him, and he went in unto her. So Laban has done a switcheroo. Now, if you ask me, how is this possible? There's a few different paths we could go down through of how this could have happened. But whereas Jacob had been working when it was promised Rachel, Laban has switched daughters. Verse 24, Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah his maid for him. That's going to be his gift. Hey, this is going to be your your handmaiden. She's going to be your assistant. That's my gift to you. Verse 25, it came to pass that in the morning, Jacob doesn't even realize what's happened until he wakes up the next morning. And behold, it wasn't Rachel, it was Leah. And he gets himself up and gets dressed and goes straight to his father-in-law and has something to say to him, and I imagine his tone is not polite. And he asked them, "What have you done to me? Wasn't our agreement? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why have you beguiled me? Why have you tricked me? Why have you manipulated me? Why have you done this?" Verse 26, Laban's answer is like, well, in our country, where we come from, we can't let the younger one get married before the older one. Verse 27, fulfill her week, and we will give this also for the service which thou shalt serve with me. Jacob, if you spend 7 years with Leah, and if you want to give me another 7 years, then I'll give you Rachel. It's like, really? Verse 28, Jacob did so. Fulfilled her week, he gave him Rachel, his daughter, to wife also. Verse 29, Laban gave to Rachel, his daughter, Bilhah, his handmaid, to be her maid. So he's going to give another gift. Verse 30, and he went in also unto Rachel, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years. Not what you were expecting, was it? It's like, yeah, you thought your family had problems? I'll kind of explain this a little bit. Let me just throw up a verse. This comes from Galatians chapter 6. It says, be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man, woman sows, that shall he also reap. Jacob is a deceiver. And now he's been the one who was deceived. Somebody is better at it than he is. For 7 years, Jacob had no idea what was going on, and in the meantime, a plan was developing behind his back. Again, no show of hands. Do you have somebody in your family who doesn't communicate openly with you, but it's like there's always something going on, and somehow it always ends up to work in their favor? We tend to think of this from Jacob's view, but how about from Rachel's view? Now she has to watch the guy she thought she was going to marry be with her sister. And then you got to start wondering, the deeper you start thinking of this, you have to wonder, could this have been pulled off without both sisters being involved to begin with? Probably not. So the obvious question here is, how? Like, how would Jacob have not noticed this? Several ideas, several paths. Some of these are good thoughts, some are not. And Rachel and I were talking about this a few days ago. A couple of ideas. Number one is that the ceremony might have been with Rachel, but the consummation was with Leah. Another one was that it was dark outside. She's waiting for him in the tent. It's dark. They don't have modern day electricity light, right? Could have been that she was wearing a veil that could not be seen, and there was, during the ceremony, it was a lot of yeah, and they're sisters, and they might resemble physical appearance and voices. There's another idea out there that with all of the feast and the banquet and the ceremony, that Laban might have instructed his servants of like, hey, make sure that you give Jacob plenty of alcohol, where his senses have been lowered and he's not even quite all there knowing what's going on. There's some other ideas too. Okay, the bottom line is this. Okay, in the Old Testament, God gave a law to the Israelites that says, while your wife is living, I'm paraphrasing, while your wife is living, do not marry her sister, or there will be rivals. Duh, right? Like, we could have told you that. As far-fetched as this sounds, have you noticed modern culture where the institution of marriage that God himself created is becoming less and less designed the way that he created it, and it's becoming more disfigured by human ideas and modification? See, everything that's being done today, it's been tried before. And every time it goes outside of God's standards, it ends poorly. So think about it like this. Should Rachel have defied her dad's authority in this case? Her dad Laban comes to her and is like, hey, you know what? I got an idea. And he could have rationalized it any way he wanted. But in the end, when the plan was laid out, we tend to look at Laban as the perpetrator, Jacob is the victim. And while that's true, there are other characters involved. Chances are Leah and Rachel are also perpetrators, and they have also become victims themselves. It's like they're both. They have made bad decisions, and now they are victims of their own bad decisions. Should Rachel have defied her dad's authority? The plan gets laid out. Should she have been like, Dad, that's not a good idea? Yeah, she should have. Because as soon as your ideas or plans contradicts the authority of God's word, your credibility is gone. Laban is literally telling his daughters that they're going to play Jacob for 7 years. Then they're going to dupe him again on their honeymoon to get another 7 years out of them. The girls should have stepped in and said, no, Dad, that is going against God, and it is dishonest toward Jacob, and you're hurting us. And now here's Jacob, and if it were me, I'd have been tempted just to walk away. Yeah, I'm done with this. But here he is. He loves Rachel so much, he's willing to work another 7 years. And now he's going to have 14 years of very hard days. Now here's the flip side. God is going to use this to discipline him and to build character. God has a habit of taking what's evil and turning it into good. God has a way of taking our stupid, unwise decisions and turning them around and bringing good of it. Yes. You can't be a disciple of God if you're not willing to be disciplined. That's right. And through Jacob, literally, the nation of Israel is going to come. And eventually, the Savior of the world is going to come through him. But Jacob isn't ready for that yet. Jacob's going to have to learn the hard way. He's going to have to make his bad decisions. People are going to take advantage of him, but all of this is forging a character, and it is forging a godliness deep inside of him. You know what we're running into today? I read an article about parenting teenagers in the culture in the world that we live in. And they were talking about how you can track your kids' movement with apps on your cell phone and see where they're at all times. And while that comes with some advantages, the other side of that is this, that if our character and our godliness and our spiritual maturity are developed when nobody is watching, what happens when there's always somebody watching? This is going to begin preparing Jacob and is going to help prepare him. If as a parent you find yourself with your grown children interfering in things that maybe aren't your business, I think you guys are having financial difficulties. Let me log into your online banking and have a look to help you out. If you find yourself manipulating or guilting people that you love, or you have an unattainable standard that nobody can meet, perhaps you need to reevaluate your relationships with the people you say you love. Because parenting changes as the child matures. Responsibilities change. Freedom changes. The relationship changes. The fruit of the Spirit is not love, joy, peace, manipulation, anger, guilt, and revenge. One day I'm not going to be around, but my kids and grandkids will be. And they're going to have to take on their own decisions and provide for themselves. And if life only works when I'm there, then I have failed them. Let me say this and then I'm done. Church, let's make sure that we as parents is that we teach them God's Word and we coach them in their spiritual walk. And we pray for them for the decisions that they will make in our absence. Let's pray together this morning.